Came when my mother brought home this box of books, and inside this box of books was the complete works of William Shakespeare. And being at that time, an 8-year-old to 9-year-old who really started to understand himself as liking people who would designate themselves as female, but I was suffering from a dilemma, a disease where I came from, which is called having no game. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that, but it's this thing of you just can't convince them, to like you back. And my little brother, he was a person who had game. He would be able to see a young woman walking down the street and say, "Hey, excuse me, can you slow up for a minute?" "Oh, you don't have a minute? I'll give you one of mine. I got 2." 11 when he was able to do that. And I'm 13 years old. At one point, I couldn't do it, but. So being a person who finds himself in love with women, of course, when I go to that book of William Shakespeare, what is the only thing I really know besides the love poems is Romeo and Juliet, right? And so I went through it. I liked it okay, but it really didn't come alive for me until I saw the 1968 Zeffirelli version of Romeo and Juliet with Olivia Hussey and Leonard Whiting, and from that point on with the language, I was hooked. Years later, I find out about something called the Juliet letters. Is anyone familiar with that? The Juliet letters, you can actually, and I do this with my classes, you can actually write to Juliet in Verona, and they have a staff of 20 people who will write you back. So just in case, if you got some issues with love, right? Write to Juliet. She might be able to hook you up. So this is my first Dear Juliet letter that I wrote, and then we'll get into it. Dear Juliet, I have always wanted to write to you. I have started this letter several times, but always stopped. I was unsure as to what a 21st century African American man would have in common with a 15th century Italian girl, especially given that at the time you were born, African Americans hadn't yet been invented. I suppose it also would have been difficult to get a letter to you knowing how your kinsmen feel about conversations between you and men of which they do not approve. And I am sure by now your daddy has talked to your peeps in Venice about Brabantio and that whole Othello Desdemona thing. Tragic bit of business, that. I just want to ask you a question, Julie. What was Romeo really like? Really. Yeah, the story is well known. He comes to a party at your crib and all your cousins start putting a heavy hating on him. But the brother is cool as penguin poop. That is, until he sees you on the dance floor gyrating your hips to pan, flute, and fiddle. And then he steps to you like some medieval Mac Daddy, and the next thing you know, you're leaving your house, a family, and a house full of bling to go and lick poison off his lips. Did you ever think to yourself, how doth one wearing such tights and funny shoes have so much swagger? Have you seen any of the films? Yeah, well, don't go see that DiCaprio one. It's cool and all that. It's a bit overwrought for my taste. But that Zeffirelli one with Olivia Hussey playing you, man, that joint is epic. Were you that cute in real life? I know that during your time, you probably weren't that big on bathing or sewage or teeth, but I bet you had to have some kind of pre-Renaissance hotness happening. But for real though, back to Romeo. Was there something in how he profaned the holy shrine of your hand? How he could not force his eyes to leave yours even when he gave you his lips' sin and then asked for it back? Or how his kiss was authored by some ancient book that only opens inside of a young girl once. Sorry to talk so much about it, but ever since I was a boy, I've always wanted to be that kind of man. Now, though, that I am married and things seem to be working out a little bit better for me and my wife than they did for you and Romeo, I would still like to know what made you love him like that. Sorry. Well, enough for now, Jules. I'll write again when I can. I don't suppose you text or tweet, do you? Holler back at a brother when you get a minute. All right, girl? Sincerely, someone who still finds a little bit of you in every woman. Thank you.